The company alarm emails
Yeah, I just gotta have it.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Let's get started. Okay. Happy Monday. I hope you had a good weekend. Today we are going to start module 3. We're going to start module 3. This is an important module which is an important part of learning Streamlit, how it works, and how we can build a Streamlit application. Okay. This will take us to a new takes us to a new step in application design when we can actually build multiple page applications. So far, we try to go around a few things or limits of a Streamlit. For example, we use a persistent data storage like JSON for now to record the information. And we didn't notice actually a limit of a Streamlit and for up to this point. But we are going to see that, and we are going to see how we can fix it and how we can use it for building better applications. Before that, I want to give you a quick review of everything that we've done. Okay, in a very quick presentation. This is everything that comes to my mind about covering topics in a Streamlit. So I put together a presentation so we can review it quickly. This is where we started. Every time we want to create a new application, you need to set up the environment. Yes, every time you want to create a Streamlit application, you need to install a Streamlit. You need to set up your environment for a virtual environment, and those sort of a starting point, like a setups. And then we talk about UI components, then we talk about the logic, and then data persistence. So I will try to review those topics in one presentation. Initially, we talked about setting up the environment. We needed to install Streamlit. We need to build the virtual environment, activate the source, and then start Streamlit. In every project, you want to have a starting point, a starting file that basically starts the application, and it looks like the main page that says, hey, the app starts from here, and these are the routes you can take and to go through the application pages. For that, let's try to use a name for the file like app.py. That way we can stay consistent in building the application that says there is one file in each of our applications called app.py. That's where the Python code exists that starts the application and gives us an idea of how to go through different pages. We talked about adding new files to our repository or our directory. One of them was .gitignore. this is the file that we need in our project, so we can specify which files shouldn't be pushed to GitHub. Every time we're pushing our project to GitHub to keep the records over time, we don't want some files to be pushed. One of them was the env file, if you recall. It's the one that keeps our secrets. We don't want to push it into GitHub and make it public. Then we also need to add a new file, requirements.txt. This is the file that will include the name of the packages needed to be installed so that you can run the application. In this case, one package you need to run the application is a Streamlit. So what you need to do is create a requirements.txt file, and in that you type a Streamlit. So anyone who runs your application knows to install it first and then start using that application. We talked about app configuration. This is like an identity that you set for your application. It comes after you specify the imports. Then you use sd.set underline page underline config. Here you can configure a few things about your application. Page title, this is the browser title. You can set a title for your browser, the icon for the page, and then the layout. You have two options, centered or wide. You can specify how the layout of the application will look like. And then initial sidebar state, collapse or not. The reason that I think this will become your application design, not just one page design, I would say is that if you go further into a Streamlit, you will see that this is a one-page application design. Meaning that when you build applications with HTML, when you build applications with Next.js and other UI applications, you create multiple pages, and for each one of them, you get different links. But in a Streamlit, it is a minimum viable product. It wants to make it simpler to do it. So when you build it, you're technically building one page, but you have different ways to make it simulate this multiple page application. Hopefully after this module, we will go to a Streamlit website to create our move our application connected to a Streamlit, and then get a link for each of our applications. And you will see that for all the applications, whether it includes 10 files or any other files, it gives you one link for your application, one page link. And that's the concept of a Streamlit, to just make it simple, but also design it in that way. All right, UI components. We worked on multiple UI components. Some of them you can use them for text elements like st.title, subheader, header. One rule we followed, or at least I said from the beginning, was that I want to try not to use any type of HTML in our coding. We don't want to make it. Our focus is specifically Python and also application design with a Streamlit. That way, we want to limit ourselves to what we use. This is why we are using this UI component, which works the same way that you can create an HTML file and import for creating titles, creating subheaders, and so on. Streamlit has these features that replace HTML coding. Title is the main title application. That's when you use a title. Headers and subheaders, you can say these are secondary and third level headers in your application. Markdown allows you to apply different configurations, fonts, sizes, designs into the text that you have inside an application. STLite divider parentheses, this is the one that allows you to create a gray line. It is very good when you want to separate the UI, separate the layout, and create a separate space, or at least simulate a separate space. It allows the user to see, or enables the user to see that you're moving to a next you're moving to the next part, next topic. For example, when when you're recording a new assignment, each assignment has multiple sections. One, title and description. Second, questions. Third, date and time. Fourth, other extra details. You don't want to have everything lined up in one layout. You want to give the idea to the user, hey, first step is configuring the main assignment features like title and description. You can add a divider and say, now this is configuring the assignment question. Add a new question, edit the question, and so on. Now, add a liner and say, now you need to set up your rubric for the assignment, right? You're exactly breaking down one big layout into multiple sections using one element. This is only one element. You will have multiple other elements to help you to break down a large page into multiple sections. We talked about multiple widgets or UI components for collecting inputs from the user. st.text input, st.text area, number input, and the one that we saw was date input. We also mentioned that elements like placeholder or help, they help the user to understand what you're collecting from the user. Sometimes, well, if the user, basically the UI, sometimes very simple. Hey, you're collecting title. It's very simple. The user understands the type of title. But sometimes you're working on a much more complicated case, and that's when you want to give a user a placeholder or info to explain it what it is that you're collecting from the user. We talked about number input. You can ask the user, for example, to enter their age using a text box. But here's the risk, and here's the things that you need to take. If you use a text box to collect the user age, then you have to do a validation after you collect the data. You have to validate it that the user provided a number, not a text, or even a text and a number is not the valid value, right? You have to collect number. So why not using an input collector which forces the user to input a number? And also you can specify what is the minimum value and maximum value or the steps. This way, you don't have to worry about the user providing number. You're sure the user will provide number because this UI design will force the user to only enter a number. There are elements that enable you to collect inputs from the user, but limit the user's ability to what they can enter. Select box and radio button. These are elements, UI components, good for when you have a list of items, a list of possible items for a specific element. For example, for a department, you know how many departments you have, and you know what are the department names in this school. So instead of giving a text box to the user to say, hey, I'm part of this department, force the user to select from an existing list of department names. This way, again, you're limiting the mistakes in data recording. You're saying these are the list of departments, and you are possibly one of them. So select one of them. not enter it yourself. The same way for radio button. The difference comes, I would say, in the case of the number of elements, number of options that you have. For example, if you're talking about the department, you have 10 departments, you shouldn't go use st.site like buttons. You should use st.select box. st.radio button is usually good for you have 2 options or 3 options and you want to like let the user choose one of them. So very limited number of options and the user can only choose one of them. That's when you can either choose select box or radio button, which I would say if it's 2 or 3, just go with at least think about radio button as an option. If it is more than that, don't use the radio button. You don't want to have like 10 radio buttons listed off because it's going to take a lot of space in your UI and then let the user think, okay, I need to choose one of these department names. If you have 10 department names, what if you increase it to 20 department names? Then you will have a lot of radio buttons. In case of a select box, it also allows you to add options like in case you can allow the user to enter value, then you can have an option like other, and then if the option is selected, then allow the user to select or enter a value. Yes. Now, let's talk about the layout. Layout designs are the key elements of the UI design, and those are the elements that define the quality of your application and your application design. Initially, the application by default in a Streamlit is a one big column, one big vertical column. That's what you get with a Streamlit. Everything is a stack on top of each other. When you add new elements, text box, radio button, everything, it just stacks up in a vertical design. That's good. Sometimes that's not good. A lot of cases. You have to be able to create different layouts for many different reasons. First, you don't want to tire the user with the same design over and over again. Actually, different UI layout designs make it more interesting, more fun to interact with the UI, to understand what is going on in the UI, and also interact better with the application. It makes it more understandable sometimes to use a different layout than just stacking everything on top of each other. So one option is st.column. This one is created, you by default, you have one big column in a Streamlit. Then you can actually change it by using st.columns and say, divide this column in wherever the area you are, divide this column into 2 columns. Here it says 2, that means 2 columns. When you enter a number, you're exactly saying, create the columns and also divide the area to exactly 50% areas. Okay. So exactly 50%. And then you create this column names that will be used as a reference to say, with this specific column, now what you are going to show. So the keyword width will include, will indicate that what is inside this area is part of column 1. The indentation here is specifying that. Indentions are a key part of a Streamlit design. Every time you add an indentation, it has a meaning. If I remove the indentation and push it back, that means this item becomes a part of the main design and not just column 1. And then again, same way here. So every time you create this, do I have to, when I create 2 columns, do I have to place content in each one of them? No. You can create two columns. That's your actually design choice. I use it a lot of times because I don't want to have a very big layout, but I want to leave the space here. So what I do, I create two columns, divide the area to two columns, and then only I use the first column. I only use the first column for the design. The other way to divide the area is with the list. Here, you can only say two columns or three columns. That equally separates the area or divides the area into multiple columns. But with SP columns and a list, you're explaining how the area should be attributed, dedicated to each column. If you use 3-1 here, that would mean divide the area, main column, wherever you are, into 4 columns, and then allocate 3 of them to call 1, and then one area to call 2. This is a great design when you want to not use the whole space, but only probably use one part of the area. And that will, if you practice it, you will see it's beneficial. You don't want to have a big text box. You can like have text box like about 1/3 of the space, and then you leave the space empty next like on the right side. The other layout option is tab. You don't want to have we work with CRUD operations, create, update, delete, view, right? You don't want to have all of them in one page. The user starts from view and then moves through all these CRUD operations. Tab is one of the options that you can choose to divide content into separate areas, and then when the user chooses or moves between the tabs, it gives an idea that the user is moving to a new page, or at least seeing a dedicated UI for a specific major operation. Again, in the case of the tabs, you use a std tab, you provide the list of the name of the tab, and the number of tabs you want to define them. And then again, with tab 1, the same pattern we use with code. You specify with tab 1, and then with one indentation or one tab indentation, you specify the content of that tab. The other layout design component here is the std container. This container is very good for creating a boundary around a specific area, a boundary. With a std container, you can create a boundary and then create a border. A lot of times we use it to separate an area from another area. So if you use a std divider, it will create a divider line under a section. But if you use a std container, it creates it, but it creates the border around the whole area. So you can actually use a combination of them. I would think of it as a good design that says, hey, I have the std container, and under it a std divider. So one container here, and one line, and then another container here. That gives a good UI design to the user. When you're working on your homework, I really hope that you're thinking about these things and you're thinking exactly how you're designing them. One of the ways that you will be graded is exactly this. If you give me straight everything in one column, that's just like not using anything. So you're losing points for that. I want you to think how I want to change this layout in a way that it becomes more intuitive, more fun, more interesting, even with the limited number of options I have. So if you give me one vertical, everything is vertical in one column, hey, that's good, but that's so simple. Okay? You didn't put enough effort into thinking how you're going to design it. Okay, so this is exactly a serious part of your grading for this homework and also for anything that comes after this. And you want to think about the layout design. Sidebar. With sidebar, you can just indicate with st.sidebar. This will be an area on the left side of your layout, and it will always be there if you specify it. And then in the sidebar, you can add buttons, you can add titles. What is the use for it? It's very good to actually build the same idea with the tabs. You can add buttons there, and then the user clicks on the buttons, and then you change the UI into new view. But for that, we need the content of the new person. We need to learn about a stateless versus a stateful, which we're going to start today. Once we complete it, I will also talk about how you can actually use sidebar as a way to switch between the tabs or simulate that idea. We talk about st.button as a triggering an action. If you are going to trigger an action, the worst choice is going to be anything other than st.button. I've seen people use radio button to say, hey, if you choose the radio button, then move on to the next one, next page. No, the user has to click so you can take the action. This is a major feature, important element in your design. For these type of actions, you want a button to trigger the action. Okay, for the requirements and then trigger the action. With the buttons, you have two important features that you can work with. The type, which will give different, like very limited, but at least it's good enough. Two options for how you design the button. The color can change, so you can see primary or secondary, or I think tertiary one was I can't remember. You can choose one of them, and the design of the button, the color design of the button will change. And then user use container with. This is when it's false, it shows the button size according to the size of the content inside it. According to the size of the content inside it. If you set it to true, it will show the size of the button as much as the column size. So if your layout is this much, then the button is going to increase as much as the size of the layout when the use container with is true. We used a JSON data persist as a method to persist the data or record the data because we don't want to work with database. And also we haven't talked about session management or session as a way to persist data. So we use this two imports we needed here. One was import JSON, one was like path_lib and for path. The first line will indicate a name for the file where you store the data. You record the path in this like variable. And then we have this when anytime you wanted to attempt to read the data and read the data from the JSON file. Why do we have DB file, for example, that exists? Because, for example, think about this. The first time the application runs and you haven't recorded anything, that file doesn't exist. May not exist or doesn't exist. If you don't check that and you attempt to directly open it, it will crash and it will give you error. So you will only attempt to open it if it exists. And in terms of opening, use this code and then like R and from JSON, from that import JSON, JSON.load. JSON.load and load it into your list. If you want to write it, then use with open with W for writing, and then from JSON, JSON.dump. This indicates that you are going to create a JSON file and record it into this path, whatever that you've defined there. Every widget must have a unique ID. This goes back to state management, which we're going to start covering today, or at least talk about it, possibly cover it extensively next session. But this is the only thing that we touch about this remembering things before starting a conversation. We talked about that we can create or assign key names to UI components. These names can be static or it can be dynamic. A static means just a simple like a text unique name for the UI component, and it doesn't change. This way, once you set that key, every time you refresh the page gets refreshed using st.rerun, the page or the Streamlit will remember the prior state. Will remember what was in the text box before page got refreshed. It will remember it because there is a key, and now the Streamlit is recorded that info before refreshing with that key name. Recorded the info inside the text box with that key name, and then refreshed the page. The dynamic is that, no, you don't want to remember the prior state. Each time you want to update that state. For example, in case of an edit, we talk about this. We said every time a new assignment is selected, the page gets refreshed. You need to update the information in the UI based on the new assignment. That's when you assign a dynamic key. So you use one of these variables that change each time with the new refresh, so you can connect those two together and make sure that it reacts to the changes in page refresh. So the importance of having keys. If you have these two components in the same page, st.text input username, st.text input username. One is for login, one is create account. You will get this error, duplicate widget ID. You will get this error, duplicate widget ID. Why do you get it? Because a Streamlit remembers items, components using their keys. When we don't assign a key, it has a key, it has a default key. And both of them have the same title and they have the same element. So they are exactly attempt to be recorded the same way. And then when it gets refreshed, it shows you that error because it's not able to identify which one is being refreshed. In order to not get this error, you need to assign a unique key to each of these elements. You need to assign a unique key name to each of these elements. Key register user, key login user. This way, the error gets fixed, and next time the page gets rerun, the Streamlit will remember which one is referencing to which key. Because now we recorded this one with this key login user, recorded this one with the key register user, and it will remember it. Remember it. The last thing is st.rerun. This is when you want to force the Streamlit to refresh the page after a major action is taken. You've attempted, for example, to open a new page. You've attempted to record an information. You want to attempt to update an information. After this is successful, the process is done, then you refresh the page so it rereads the information and loads the correct information given that state. All right, good. this was a quick review of everything that is needed to move on to the next topic. How about I take a break and you take the attendance, and then we start actually today's presentation. Start the new module. Right. So, let me just set this to 3 minutes. And while you're taking it, I can. Whenever you completed it, go to Canvas, make sure to download this MD file and open it in your project that we've been working on. So go to Canvas, you will see an MD file for today's module and download it, and you can open it into your project. Hey, let's see if it is working. Yes. Will take time. Everyone take attendance. So far it shows me that I think everyone took
Should we
attendance.
title our file name for the project like module 3 or something?
Let me get to it. All right, okay. So let me now go to our project. All right. First, let me open this file. Okay, so this is our new file. What I will do, I want to make sure it is in this directory state ls to stateful.md, and I will add it here. All right. Okay, good question. So here, let's start with creating a new Python file. I will use this app. I don't know what day we are now, because we used the day 3 multiple days. So just let's name it day 6.py, and then we can start from here.
How do we implement it that we have to like make it so that it connects to Streamlit, or do we not have to do that?
No, you're doing it. So that's why you want to go
You
back
want
to
to add
the
it.
file that and you had this Streamlit. All right. Okay. So today we are starting module 3 from a stateless to a stateful. In this module, I want to cover 3 important topics. Which are connected to each other, but the major topic here is st.session and state. We will talk about the one thing which probably we haven't noticed yet, which is a Streamlit forgets thing. On every rerun, it will forget the prior state. It can only remember it if we store it. How do we store it? We haven't talked about it. but we only have used one way to store it using the keys for the elements. We just talked about it. In order to Streamlit to remember what was in the text box after the rerun, you added key name to it. That's how we record stuff. We're going to actually talk about it, and we will use that concept to store other information that we want a Streamlit to remember after it reruns the page. Then we will talk about rule-based routing. What's a rule-based routing? Very simple. Hey, we use the same application. I'm the instructor, you're a student. We use the same application. How is that when I log in, I see a different dashboard than you see? Very simple. One if and else can make that happen. It's like we're gonna store a role for each user to say the role of this user is an instructor, the role of this user is a student, the role of this user is the admin, the role of this user, blah blah. And then when you run the application, it will check for very simple if and else. It says if the role of that user is a student, you're going to take this path. If the role of that user is instructor, you're going to take this path and show these pages to that user. Technically, you will call that a role-based routing that checks the role of the user, and then based on that, it shows the user a set of pages or a dashboard any design. And then a state-driven navigation. We'll talk about this. It is, again, I think the main topic that needs to be understood is the session state, but because these ones are a little bit simpler once it's built and we've developed the understanding. This is just about creating the concept of pages, multiple page applications. We're going to build it without actually creating pages, because when I think of pages, I'm thinking of multiple HTML pages. But here we don't create multiple HTML pages. We only always will get one link to our application. From a Streamlit, it will give us one link to our application. But how is that we can create multiple pages using this st.session? All right, so let's start from here. First, we want to catch up on what we did last session. I already have the code. Let's start by practicing how you would start. The first part, you can copy and paste it from the file as we move on. First, it's about adding the imports. If when you're building the application, you're setting your import and the files that you need to import into the project. Then we said you want to set out the identity of your application using this set.page.config. Once you did that, let's try to run the application. Streamlit run. Oh. So here, when I set page config, page title, course manager, what I'm setting is not the title inside the page, but the title in the browser page. Here, do you see at the top, it shows you an icon and it shows you the title. That's what you're putting or you're setting, you're configuring with that one line of code. If you want to use a different icon, just add here an icon and then set an icon, page icon for it. For now, we don't have any icon, so we can move on. For this version, we are going to skip completely thinking about data loading from JSON. What we are going to do is just simply what we did initially. Users, we need a list of users. This is, we are building a login and registration. And we want a list that stores the list of the users, the information, the credential, and we can use it for a login check and also for registration for recording. So I need a list. For some reason, this file didn't include the one that we had last session about the admin. So I'm going to just copy it from that, and please add it into your file so we all start with the same user. So the only user we have for now is the admin user. The ID is one, email address, password, and so on. I'll go back, sorry. Yes. The reason that we are copying this code is because we already worked on this on last Friday. And that's why I want to move a little bit faster into the main topic of this or this new module. So I had the code so you can copy it into your code. All right, I will go back here and now let's copy this part about the login. Okay, so the first part is about the login. Let's see what the login does. The login uses the std container to create an area. Yes. So I'm going to make a file. Yeah, sure. Is that better? Okay. Yeah. Actually, yes, I can close this. Okay. So let's review what this login does. It uses this std container to create this UI for the login. The organization is, hey, organization is still very simple. I didn't want to spend much time on the design part, but if you wanted, you can come up with other designs as well. With the std container, think about this. When I close this, do you see this drop down? When I close that, I don't see anything. So with container, with std.tab, it says it contains every code that you have put inside that area with that indentation. Okay, so everything inside the std.container gets that indentation, and then the other ones that come, they get additional indentation given that where they are. So when the user clicks on st.button, you have the st.spinner, and then it checks whether the user's email address exists within the list, and if it says if the password is correct, and then says okay, you're logged in. Now let me go back and paste the registration area here. Okay. So for the registration, I'm covering this. Make sure that this is how we're covering. It's not part of that container. It's a separate section under the container that we have for the login. So our header is a new account or new instructor account with a similar design. And a vertical organization for the UI components, and then a button which what will it do? It will add the new user's information to the list of the user. One thing new is here that you can, from now on, add to your code. If you pay attention, I don't know if you have seen this before, but this is new. Where did it come from? We imported UUID. What is a UUID? It creates unique identifier. You know, we had this issue how, like, every time we wanted to record a new record into the list or record it into the file, we needed to assign a unique identifier, unique number to it. This is more, what would say, or common way to create this as a more professional approach for generating a new unique ID for every record. So you import the file, import that into your file, and then wherever you need to include or add this and create a new ID for your record, you will call that function. UUID dot UUID4 parentheses, and then you need to use str to change it into a string. So you can store it in the ID. ID is a string. So this is just the same way that happens with every time for any type of, if you're creating a new assignment. For the new assignment, for the new ID for a new assignment, you can use the same code for the ID to generate it and then record it. Also, again, we don't want to work with JSON. Please, if you have this, make sure you remove it from the code for now. All right. So if you have this JSON part, remove it. So we don't have any imports, any use of JSON file in our code, right? So we only have login and password. Registration. We're not, let me remove this. I want to also review one thing that we talk about in our presentation. Okay. Let's think about this. Let's think that the code is this. Okay. So I have two text boxes. One is email, one is password. And here I also have email. Okay. I also have email and also I have password. Do you notice this? So let me just reduce the size for now so we can see them in the same file. Can you pay attention to these two? This is for registration and that's for login. Both are text input email, but we are using it for registration. There, we are using for login. What will happen if I run this? Make sure that pay attention there is not like what we have here about each of these elements. I will run it. Okay. So we get this error. What is the error? The error says duplicate element ID, and then it says text input element with the same auto-generated ID. This is the one that we covered in that presentation. We said Streamlit needs to assign a unique key to every UI component, and that's how it will remember it. We'll remember what was in the text box, for example, before it attempted to refresh the page or rerun the page. Both of the text boxes, for example, for email, have the same name. So they will be stored with the same ID, with the same key. When it refreshes and then it attempts to load the information, it gets mixed up. It cannot identify which one is which. That's why when you're creating the widgets, you're creating your components, you need to specifically assign a unique key to each one of them. So how does that work? I'm going to assign a unique key here and say key is equal. Okay, this is email login. Email login. Okay, so for the login, the title is the same. The key has to be different. The key has to be different. So key is email login. For the registration, the key, I will set it to email underline registration register. Now each one of them have separate key names. Okay, here each one of them have the separate key name. And what is that? It's a static key name. A static key name. It doesn't change on any type of action. So it's a static. The same way for password. This says key, okay, password edit, okay, password edit. Here I'm changing these key names, right? I'm assigning a key name for every UI element, or at least the case that we are collecting the inputs. Oh, we are out of time. All right, the last one, I will do this and we can end it here. Password, okay, log in. So this way, let me just run this again and you will see that you don't see that error again, right? All right, so it gets fixed now. So the issue was that the elements didn't have unique IDs and we did that. All right, thank you so much. We already taken attendance. We are gonna start from here on Wednesday. Make sure to push it to GitHub. Don't forget that part. Yeah.
So like, would that mean like, that was something because then you don't have to like have people like all in.
Let me give you the information next session. So it will be depending on your leaders. I will probably just ask you to you already define about the password you can kind of attach it to your application, right? And that's about it. You have this attached to the application, and show the rest of whatever it is that's it.
And then on top of that too, so like, should there be a second? Maybe like a separate, like, code keys as you see, so it should be like.
Yeah, you have your code, just think about that as a single, you're just like, add one part to the top of the. Yeah, sure. All right,